holidays, bills, fun stuff, you can't pay that with paper money. It doesn't exist. So you have to use cash to be able to do that. So the real key thing moving forward and the focus point is to focus on the cash flow rather than building more assets that don't deliver that back to you. This is Gavin Jace. Welcome back to the Not Rich Yet show, where we help everyday Aussies regain control of their finances. Jace, great to have you here again, mate. I love looking across at you, those dreamy eyes.
It's my favourite time of the day.
Every single time, just, give me warm feelings inside. Today, we're going to talk about not Jason's dreamy eyes. We're going to talk about this concept that keeps happening and we're seeing more and more of, which is people who are in this bucket of being paper rich and cash poor. And I'm not talking about, poor as in living on the streets, but I'm just talking about the cash situation doesn't meet the assets on paper. And sort of where this concept has come from is I was talking to my friend the other day and they were talking about how their house keeps doubling in value every 10 years. But they said to me, I just feel like I am struggling every week, and it's interest rates changing, cost of living going up, all of that stuff is affecting their cash flow, and they just wish that the actual cash side matched the paper side. So obviously really important concept. We've got some great takeaways and steps for people who are in that situation that we're going to talk about later. You're obviously at the coalface of this. Tell us about what you're seeing when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Well, people in these type of situations, I always like to tell them your equity doesn't pay for your groceries. And it's really important to really sit back and say, I might have an asset that's growing. You mentioned your friends paying, huge amounts of interest at this time, and it's only getting worse at the time of the market. So being a balance of being cash rich and paper rich is really important, and how to become cash rich is understanding the steps to take and budgeting the right way.
Let's take half a step back and let's talk about the characteristics of people that are sort of in this bucket. So generally they've got good income, and good isn't defined by a number because the situation determines whether it's good or not. Typically that might be income that's combined, so there might be two people working together, maybe they've got some kids. There's some sort of house and a bunch of other assets that are either appreciating or, you can look at on paper and go, gee, that's a lot. And on the other side of things, in real life, the bank balance isn't increasing. The bills keep coming in. There's always a need for cash, whether it's, another excursion that the kids need to go on, or dance lessons or swimming lessons or whatever else. And there's this squeeze and disconnect between the paper situation, because the assets keep growing, and the actual cash side of things. And that can leave people really confused, because on one side, they're earning good money, they've got lots of income that's coming in, and their assets look good on paper. But on the other side, that feeling of having to have money and finances at the front of their mind all the time, that is what is creating this feeling of, stress, anxiety, and being out of control all the time. So what are the other sort of characteristics that you see for people who are in that situation?
Yeah, I can just give an example of one of my clients that, they're a couple with no kids. So I like to call them dinks. So, dual income, no kids.
Yep.
They're in their late 50s, and they have 6 homes. So they have 6 assets. They've been able to build 6 assets, one that they live in and the other 5 are investments. But as a total savings, as a couple, they have less than $10,000 in savings. And they're, coming to me and asking, we're struggling because we're in our late 50s, and we're kind of wanting to understand the plan towards retirement and things like that. And they're asking me, why are they struggling to wanting to go on holidays every year, to go visit their niece in London and things like that. Why do they feel like they're struggling to go find the time and the money to go buy a ticket to Europe and not feel so worried about their finances?
Yeah, totally. And not to delve into that exact situation, but people who feel like they're in this same situation, what I say to them is, you're not broke, you're just cash poor. And the way we'll talk about what to do a little bit later on how to do that. But the other frustrating part of people who are in this situation is that if you look at the main asset being the house that they're living in, that keeps going up. They might have a whole bunch of equity that's sitting in that. The debt may not necessarily be going down as fast as what they want, but they can't necessarily access that equity in the property, because if they do, they're borrowing more to fund their lifestyle.
Things.
And they have to live somewhere. So they can't sell the house because they're probably going to buy into another area or another market that's far more expensive than what they originally purchased it for. So I can understand people who are in this situation feeling like there's this squeeze and pressure and they don't know what to do. And I resonated with it myself because I was in exactly the same situation. I've got my wife, I've got 2 kids. Both of those have needed a whole bunch of cash along the way. And I remember, and I think back to looking at my house, and there was hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity that was sitting in that. And then looking at my family going, how do I reconcile this thing between I need cash for them and to do what I want, and I've got these assets here, how do I sort of leverage that? And we'll talk more about what to do in that situation. But the key concept, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, was, holidays, bills, fun stuff. You can't pay that with paper money. No. It doesn't exist. So you have to use cash to be able to do that. So the real key thing moving forward, and the focus point, is to focus on the cash flow rather than building more assets that don't deliver that back to you.
Yep.
Have you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, if you're in a position where you own a house and you feel like you have good income, like, don't ever feel like you're in a position to get more income. Chasing income is never the right solution. It's really understanding what your income is and what you can work around within that income and make your life much easier and have a higher cash flow.
Yeah, and let's talk about why we say don't necessarily go and chase more income. There are certain circumstances where people need more income, but the people who are in this situation where their assets look good but their income looks good, more income is only going to lead to more spending. And we've spoken about it on other episodes before, this concept of lifestyle creep, which is the more money you earn, the more money you spend. Mm-hmm. And it's just a fact of what happens. So, and then if you think about people who are earning this are in the higher tax brackets. So let's just say you do earn more money, 35, 47% of all of that income is going to go straight to the tax man anyway. So say you're left with half of it, that's not going to go as far as what you think. No. It's really not. And so there's 2 ways that you can sort of reconcile it. You can say, let's make more income, which then dilutes down to what you can actually use. Or let's have a look at the lifestyle, the spending, and start putting a plan in place so that you can feel cash rich and that the cash matches the paper.
Yep.
I think that's really the key concept
really
of it,
important.
Right? Let's talk about cost of living and how that makes people feel and magnifies this pressure. What's your thoughts or experience with that?
I mean, look, cost of living obviously affects everybody, especially in Australia. And, people feel like the groceries are too expensive. The big supermarket brands are charging them too much these days. And, we had an episode where we compared different products and what you can actually get out of that product. The big example is, like, if you buy diced chicken breast, it's substantially more higher than if you just bought the chicken breast as a whole and you diced it yourself. Like, there's small changes in lifestyle that you can do to adjust to that. And it's really important that you're not stuck in a lifestyle that doesn't match in today's economy. You have to understand and be okay with change along the way. And in the future, if the economy gets much more better for you, you might have a better lifestyle in terms of that change. But changing for quote unquote the worst is really important to adapt to and be adapted to that.
Yeah, and I think so. When I speak to people who are in this category and in this situation, what I am reminded of is that there's probably 2 subsets of people. There's a subset of people who are already feeling pressure, and the cost of living magnifies that pressure. And there's a subset of people who haven't felt the pressure yet. And so what happens in finances is, in personal finances, is there's always a buffer between expenses and income. And sometimes that's a small amount, sometimes that's a big amount. Every time that cost of living changes or increases or interest rates go up, that buffer gets reduced.
Yep.
People feel pressure. And now a whole bunch of people who were in the okay category are now down in the feeling pressure category. So the other factor that I want to touch on with cost of living is that prices don't go down. Everyone's holding out and saying, can't wait for inflation to reduce and all of that sort of stuff. Inflation reducing just means that prices are going up at a slower rate. You look at stuff that you were paying, the price you were paying for the same thing 3 years ago, we're not seeing those prices again. They're not going back down. And so if that's what people are holding out for, that the cost of living is going to reduce and that's going to solve everything, it's not going to solve anything. Inside the income that you're making and the expenses that you're spending money on, that's where you need to focus on.
Definitely agree with that.
Let's talk about this concept of people in this category, or in this situation, have a sense of guilt, and that guilt comes in a couple of different ways. The first one in that they're earning decent income and their financial position from a cash perspective doesn't match how much they're earning. When I speak to people, they're saying, I'm earning this amount of money, I shouldn't have to worry about money. It's like, well, yeah, that's right. That's because it's not in control and you've neglected it. Then on the other side, they've got this feeling of guilt where they probably know deep down that there's a whole bunch of cash that they're wasting on certain things. And we spoke about it in multiple episodes before. When I was, rewind decades ago, not a lot of people know this about me, but I used to actually DJ at house parties and nightclubs and all of that sort of stuff. And when I was in this situation, earning really good money, but the cash flow didn't meet that. When I looked at my finances and where I was spending my money, like 50 or 80% of it, somewhere between that, on any given week or month, was going towards DJ supplies, nights out, buying new music, new records, all of that sort of stuff. And then, so if you take that away, once I identified it, you take that away and you're like, wow, I've got all of this cash to do other stuff with. Now, I'm not saying that the people who are listening to this are all DJs and that's where all their money's going, but there are those habits that are in everywhere. Yeah. And it's about identifying those and making a behavior change so that you feel more in control.
Yeah, I mean, an example with when I'm speaking to my clients, the first thing I do is with them is I ask them what they spend on each category. So, for example, I ask them, how much do you think you spend on groceries? How much do you think your rent is? How much do you think you spend on entertainment and other factors? And that final number, let's just say, for example, it's $1,500 a week on everything, is never it's never accurate when we go through their statements and really go through the nitty gritty of their spendings. It's always usually much higher than what they actually told me. So, and from me, gathering from that is, people who are, people aren't aware or fully understanding or in control of what they have actually spent their money on, and they don't have a exact idea of what their money is doing.
So we know the situation. The good news is that, we advocate for this all the time. We live and breathe this every day, and we're our own case studies, but also we've got a whole bunch of other clients that we've helped with this. The good news with that is that there is actually something you can do about it, right? So let's run through some sort of steps and top tips to go from where you are feeling like you're paper rich but cash poor, and how you can move through that. I think the first thing is to stop relying on your net worth or on these assets or even the amount of income that you earn as a comfort blanket to justify everything else. And when I say that, I'm talking to people and they throw it around all the time. I'm earning this amount of money, or I'm earning way too much money to live like I'm broke. It's like, well, you are actually broke from a cash flow perspective. You're just not prioritizing where that cash goes. So I think that's the first one. Any points on that? step?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, like, people who think they're broke, if they're not, okay, again, like they're never broke on paper. It's more sort of they just don't know where their money is moving, and understanding that movement is really the key.
Yeah, totally. I think step 2 is to measure the cash flow that's coming in and going out, not the income overall, because the income's only one measure of it. And my favorite thing to say to clients is, what do you spend money on this, this, and this, and list it all out, and then take the income off it, and then say, well, there's a gap of $500, $600, $800, $900 a week, month, whatever, that's unallocated for. That's what's leaking.
Yep.
So measure cash flow that's coming in and going out, not the income. I think that's a really good point. The third step is to identify what's actually locking up the cash. And this could be a really obvious thing. So you were talking before about a client that you spoke to that's got 6 investment properties or 6 properties all up. There would be a large proportion of that that's being locked up in it. I'm not saying to invest money in properties. I'm not saying don't, but could be something that could be rearranged or restructured so that they could free up more cash flow. Another killer is car loans. We see it all the time. The average car loan is $700 a month. That's money that you're not spending on other stuff. And yes, everyone needs a car, but do you need a car that's that expensive and with a loan on it that is that much?
And also depreciating too.
Totally. So step 3, identify what's locking up the cash. The fourth one is stop chasing more income as the solution. We've bung on about this a lot. There are certain situations where you need to chase more income, but for most people, that's actually not going to solve the problem, because the more they earn, the more they spend. And step 5, the last step, is utilize and leverage the income that you already have to create more cash flow. And so that might be by investing in various different things. It might be by pursuing other opportunities to go and do that. You've spoken to me in the past about some sort of side hobbies that you've got to create more cash. But if the cash flow is the problem, the solution is to focus on that, right? Any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is like a life personal example for me. And during COVID, I was sitting at home, and I was just thinking, like, why don't I have enough cash flow every week that I'm satisfied with? So what I did was I invested in equipment to get the tools right to then start a side hobby of building PCs and charging people to build PCs. And during COVID, the gaming craze was absolutely the number one trend. Everyone's buying a computer because they're stuck at home. And I made so much cash flow on top of what I earned as a job by building computers on the weekend or after work. And it only took me an hour or two to build one computer, and I created extra cash flow that way, and I utilize that in other ways. So.
Is there anything you don't do? So you drone pilot.
Yep.
Blackjack dealer.
Yep.
What else have we got?
Golfer.
Shoe
collector. Fireman. Yep. I'm a fire warden, chief fire warden. Shoe collector. Golfer. What else is there? I swim.
Anyway, so that's completely off topic, but they're the 5 steps, I think, that if someone's in that situation, what they've got to do right now. Obviously, if they want help doing that and want to do it faster, they can reach out to us. We're more than happy to do that. But any final takeaways or final words before we wrap up?
No, just for me, it's really important just to understand your situation, and if you feel like you're broke and your money isn't moving the way you want it, go see somebody that can help you adjust to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jace. It's been great as always. Really appreciate your effort on the show. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and everyone who's listening, I hope you guys have enjoyed it too.
Awesome.
Can't wait to see you in the next show.